morning. So I'm going to talk about a couple of the things we spoke about yesterday, our experience with harvest strategies and ecological risk assessments in Australia. I guess they're more related to the sort of tools we use. I'm going to try and actually pick up some of the comments made by Daniel and Stephen this morning as well. There's going to be some common slides, so I'll try and go through those quite quickly. It's not on. Okay. So I want to talk about the harvest strategies and actually give you some results, what actually happened when we implemented these harvest strategies. Talk about the ERA in a little bit more detail for those who aren't aware of it, but also again give some examples of the sorts of things it can do, and then just some directions and some concluding remarks. Whoops, wrong way. So you saw this in the early 2000s, our fisheries weren't very healthy. We had this big securing our fisheries future, which was to stop overfishing basically and rebuild the stocks. And there's a lot in here about stock rebuilding as well. We adopted this harvest strategy policy and we implemented it in 2008. So what is a harvest strategy? I guess I didn't have time to really go into this sort of detail yesterday, but it's a framework that specifies predetermined management responses or actions in a fishery for defined species, necessary to achieve an agreed ecological, economic, or even social management objective. And we saw these key elements about objectives, performance measures, reference points, acceptable levels of risk, monitoring strategy, assessment, and again the assessment here is very much about a broad range of assessments. It's not specific, full-blown stock assessment, and decision or control rules. And someone asked me the question about, would this be really difficult for Brazil to do? Well, hopefully I can show you we've done it for enough data poor fisheries that it wouldn't be hard. And the other thing is too, if you're kind of running a business, you'd kind of do that, apart from the control at the end. But if you're running a business, most of those sort of things you could translate into business speak. So, but the design principles, and these are really important. So they've got to be consistent with your legislative objectives. In Australia's case, it's ESD. But they've got to be pragmatic and easy to understand. They've got to be cost effective. There's no point putting in a process which is really, really, really expensive. They've got to be transparent and inclusive, precautionary, and adaptive. And I think the thing about them is, when we were implementing them in Australia, we spent a lot of time with the stakeholders, with our industry partners, particularly for those data poor fisheries, where some of the fishermen and fishers weren't that experienced or hadn't been exposed to a lot of stock assessments. So we actually worked with the industry to come up with harvest strategies which meant the intent of the policy, but also were practical and actually could give us the results we wanted. So we weren't going to set ourselves up to fail, and we needed the industry to help us do that. So we talked about the details yesterday. I won't go through these again. I'll just see, I think, the next slide. And just the point that was made about rebuilding, what happens when you're not overfished anymore. So in the Australian example here, below this biomass called B limb here, which we designate as overfished, when you sort of recover into the amber zone between B limb and B targ on this graph, the fishing mortality is still really low. So it's not as though you stop being overfished and then everyone can go fishing again. The fishing mortality is kept very low, so the stock continues to rebuild, even though you're fishing. So that's a way of trying to increase, so until you get to the sort of BMSY, B targ, you've still got this very low fishing mortality, and that's a really important thing to do. And it goes both ways, of course. As you start going down, the fishing mortality goes down, so you stop. You don't want to keep going down to B limb. So, implementing it. We adopted it with a major restructure package, because unlike in Norway, we had ITQs in the fishery for a long time, and some of our fisheries, but it wasn't causing the fisheries the effort to decline. So we actually had to buy buy the effort out. We adopted it for data rich and data poor fisheries. And in the case of the data poor fisheries, you don't have estimates of BLIM and BMSY and those things. What you're trying to do is come up with proxies that meet the intent of the policy, and you can do that. We used it for data poor fisheries, so the Northwest Slope trawl fishery, for example, it had closures and a minimum CPUE trigger. For data rich, the northern prawn fishery had a full bioeconomic model. So that, you have those sort of distinct differences. And we also MSC tested as many as harvest strategies as we could, including some of the data poor ones, to ensure that they complied. The other thing we did, and this is something that they've done in the US, and also I think they're looking at in the EU now, is look at these tiers. So this is a kind of a hierarchy, if you like. So the tier 1 is what we call a robust stock assessment. That's the full-blown stock assessment. Tier 2 is a less certain stock assessment. It's, it's a bit bouncy from year to year. Tier 3 is an estimate of exploitation rate. We used catch curves or some variation on catch curves. And Tier 4, trends in CPUE. And this is for the southern fishery I spoke about yesterday. So what happens is there's an explicit reduction in the TAC as the tier level increases. So this is a way to try and deal with the risk across. If you get down to a Tier 4, that's more uncertain than a Tier 1. So the catch that comes out from a Tier 4 needs to be adjusted. Now we call those discount rates. I think in the US they call them buffers, but it's the same sort of process. And stocks can move between tiers. So if the industry wants to invest more money in lifting up a tier, they get more catch for it. The other thing I didn't mention yesterday was that what we do is we do the assessment, apply the control rule, and that gives a recommended biological catch. The recommended biological catch then has the discards removed from it, the state catch is removed from it, and the recreational catch is removed from it, and that's what becomes the TAC. So that's how that works now. The other thing we've done, so that was in one fishery. The other thing we've done is tried to come up with aggregating a whole bunch of tiers across a whole bunch of fisheries around Australia. So we've got a whole range now of tiers, Tier 5, and these are just examples, but that just uses average length. Or it might use a risk assessment like the SAFE method that we use in ERA. In some cases it uses catch triggers. And right in the very lowest one, we have some fisheries which we've got very little information, lots and lots of species. And so we look at groups of species and species composition and things like that. So those might be more analogous than some of the Brazilian examples. So, and it's also precautionary. We talked about this yesterday. But BMS, what we're setting our fishery at is about 50% of the unfished biomass. We close fisheries effectively below B20, 20% of the unfished biomass. We have a 10% risk rule, so we don't want the species in our projections to have any more than a 10% chance of going below the limit. And we've also employed these tiered harvest strategies. So it's a fairly conservative sort of approach. Now, does it work? So, the solid circles there are designated overfish stocks. And you can see since we've implemented the harvest strategy, the number of overfish stocks are just continuing to decline. That's a pretty successful way of looking. So the number of overfish stocks has dropped by 20%. Overfishing has also dropped. So these harvest strategies have really changed our fisheries considerably. The number of stocks which are overfishing has gone down to 0 in 2014. Even things like orange roughy, and I use orange roughy as an example. We had a moratorium on orange roughy from 2007 when all the trawl grounds were closed below 700 meters. That's actually now just been opened again, but at a very, very low catch. because orange roughy, they don't mature to about 30. They had 30 years of recruitment coming behind. Now it's going to take a long time, as Stephen said, to rebuild the age structure, but with very low fishing mortalities, you're still going in the right direction. So I think that's a pretty good story of what you can actually do if you have the right will. So just getting back to ERA again, I'll give some examples for ERA. Again, some of this we saw yesterday. So the whole thing about why we developed ERA in the first place is the science challenge. So you've got a fishery, 1 to 20 target species, 250 bycatch or discard species, 100 to 300 threatened and endangered species, 100 habitats, 150, say 1 to 50 ecological communities. How do you assess them? You can't use stock assessments. There's not enough scientists or money in the world to do that sort of stuff across all the fisheries we have. So we need another approach, and what we developed was this risk-based approach. And here we're defining risk as the probability that some property ecological system will change beyond acceptable limit, and the acceptable limit here is probably the risk of not achieving the ecological objective. And there's lots of examples there: stock collapse, species extinction, range changes, habitat fragmentation. There's lots of examples there of the sorts of things you don't want to happen, the undesirable events. So I showed this yesterday, and I'll keep, so we basically got these different levels, a scoping level, and again, this is very much like the harvest strategy. We needed industry and the stakeholders to sit around the table and scope out the fishery to start with. The first level, and the idea is, as you start with hundreds and hundreds of species, and hopefully when you get down to level 3 in high-risk species, you've only got handfuls. This is the whole sort of approach. Now, level 1 is a thing called scale intensity consequence analysis. It's a sort of standard risk analysis. And what happens is we've got the 5 components: target species, bycatch, protected species, habitats, and communities. And across a range of impacts, you score them 1 to 6, where 1 is no risk or very low risk, and 6 is really high risk. Anything that's 3 and above is called a high risk, and that goes to level 2. The things that 1 and 2 are called low risk, you don't look at those again. So in this case, this is for southern bluefin tuna. The habitats and the bycatch species are regarded as low risk and not required for further work. The level 2 we spoke about yesterday, this is a productivity susceptibility productivity analysis, and this is basically saying if you're a highly susceptible species and you've got low productivity, you're at high risk. If you're not very susceptible to the fishing gear, but you're highly productive, you're at, obviously at low risk. Productivity is based on a whole bunch of life history characteristics: how long the fish live, what age they mature, and susceptibility is accountability, the overlap between the fishery and the particular species, and selectivity and those sorts of things. And here's an example from a demersal seine fishery. And as you can see, you've got a number of species up into the high risk. Here's an example for habitats, where you've got habitats which are a lot of epibenthos on them. They might have sponges or deep sea corals. They're probably going to be high risk to a trawl fishery, whereas gravelly habitats or sandy habitats are probably going to be a low risk to a trawl fishery. So those are the sorts of approaches that we take. And just to show the whole thing, you start by scoping the fishing activities. You do that level 1 I showed you. You do the level 2, the susceptibility productivity analysis. And then the level 3 is a full-blown stock assessment. Or it might be population viability analysis, or potential biological removals for threatened species. So that's the sort of approach. So what does it actually do? So here's an example, again from the southeast fishery I spoke about yesterday. Level 1, you've got 600 species and 158 habitats that you're assessing. By the time you get to level 2, you're down to 159 species and 46 habitats. When you get down to level 3, 25 species are identified as needing action. Now, 3 of those species were the gulper sharks, which I spoke about yesterday. So you can start to go focus all your resources on those high-risk species. And we've done all Australian fisheries, well over 2,000 individual species. Obviously, some of the species occur in multiple fisheries, over 200 habitat types. There's been applications in the US, in regional fisheries management organizations at Galapagos. Marine Stewardship Council's picked up 1 and 2, modified somewhat, but using their risk-based framework. CITES are picking up through JNCC and things like that. So it's being adopted a fair bit. If you want more information, the paper by Hobday et al. On Fisheries Research sort of describes the method. So the directions, what we're trying to do is bring the harvest strategy policy and our bycatch policy, which deals with the discard. So we're trying to bring the sort of the tiered approach I've just talked about with the ERA together in a kind of continual framework. So that's the explicit link between the harvest strategy policy and the ERA. And we're rolling out a national approach. The ongoing research is refining ecological risk assessments. One of the issues about this ERA is that it's designed to give you false positives. And what that means is, if you don't have much information or you haven't got enough experts to give you any sense of where that species is, it's automatically high risk. Even if it's not, but you just haven't got any information. So that's designed to make sure you don't miss something. It's designed to ensure you don't get false negatives. So a false negative is where you say a fish is low risk, but it's really high risk. So it's trying to give it all the bias towards the false positives. And I showed you yesterday this, we're trying to do a national approach to harvest strategies. This is going to be more difficult for the states because they actually got recreational fisheries and indigenous fisheries, and we're trying to think about how we put a harvest strategy together when you've got multiple sectors dealing with the same species. It's a lot harder than dealing with just the commercial fisheries. So just some concluding remarks. It has been successfully implemented. We've seen a dramatic shift in the number of stocks which are demonstrating overfishing. We're seeing a rebuilding of overfished stocks. ERA has been very effective for us, and it's been picked up globally. I'm amazed when I go to conferences how many people give talks about using PSA in their institutes or in their countries. What we haven't done in Australia is to develop some more explicit links between the two areas, and that's what we're working on at the moment. So thank you.
Gostaríamos de abrir a inscrição para os especialistas.
Obrigada. Não, eu queria fazer um comentário nas palestras super interessantes, tanto do aspecto de reconstrução dos estoques, das pescarias e das estratégias de manejo. Então, eu queria só assim, levantar um tema para o debate que é muito importante, um tema...
I'm not getting any translation.
Posso falar em português e inglês depois.
I'm getting you very well through my headphones in Portuguese, so
Em português.
but not in English. So it makes answering the question a bit hard for me, I'm afraid.
Posso falar?
That's better, yes.
Ok? Bom, o que eu estava dizendo é que palestras excelentes, muito bom, a gente está nesse debate sobre reconstrução e estratégias de manejo. Eu queria chamar a atenção para um problema que todos os palestrantes falaram da importância se uma espécie não for pescada por um período, né, se a decisão for que ela não seja pescada por um período, seja ele o quanto for, que ela realmente não seja capturada, seja por outro tipo de pescaria ou por captura ilegal. E aqui no Brasil, a gente tem um problema muito sério com captura ilegal. Então, eu acho que a gente começar a discutir as estratégias de rebuilding, a gente tem que, em algum momento, discutir também como que se faz com a captura ilegal, né? Acho que a pesca da lagosta, eu vi até o Renê se inscrevendo, acho que ele vai falar disso. Porque a pesca da lagosta, por exemplo, estava tomando café com a Martilene, e ela falou que esse ano, no defeso, né, Martilene, a pescaria ilegal do compressor e da rede continua normalmente. Então, é uma norma que você pode ter cientificamente o melhor embasada. Se a gente não encontrar uma solução prática, a gente nunca vai conseguir nenhuma ação efetiva. E isso não é um assunto fácil ou trivial, né? Porque há muitos anos se tenta e não se consegue. Acho que talvez seja o caso de discutir com o Ministério da Pesca qual que é a nova abordagem, ou o que está se pensando.
Yeah? Okay. É extremamente interessante, realmente, não só essa, como as demais. Eu acho que estamos afunilando para um elemento muito importante, e o que me vinha aqui à mente é demandar uma coisa que é sempre difícil. A minha fala de ontem foi também nesse sentido. Os 3 casos, o terceiro agora, a Austrália, existe um nível de organização entre pesquisadores e com os tomadores de decisão, os stakeholders do governo, que tem uma lógica um pouco diferente da nossa. Isto é, nós somos bagunçados pra caramba. Aqui, very messy here. Tirando isso, eu gostaria realmente muito de solicitar, não só para o professor Smith, mas para os demais, na hora que for possível, sugestões de articulação que permita com que esses diferentes graus sejam estabelecidos entre academia e tomadores de decisão. Essa articulação eu acho muito importante, porque a gente pensar em contribuir para a academia. Eu fiz uma pesquisa há algum tempo atrás e perguntei para gestores que informação que eles gostariam de ter na mesa para a tomada de decisão. Produção pesqueira, quase sempre. E nós, da academia, sabemos que não é uma informação muito boa para a tomada de decisões. Isto é, como aumentar o diálogo entre esses que vão fornecer essas informações. Venha do etnoconhecimento, venha de pesquisas muito detalhadas, de microquímica e genética, para que tomadores de decisão tenham realmente a informação necessária, aumentar o diálogo, né? E eu gostaria de ter uma ideia, se isso foi um desafio na Austrália, ou se nasceu naturalmente pela organização da sociedade.
So let me respond to that one first. I've been around in Australia for quite a long time, and I can remember the days in the late 80s when basically all the scientists got together once a year, no one else was allowed in the room, and we all pontificated, and we all did our work, and then we called the managers in and said, this is what's going on, and occasionally we'd let industry in the room as well. What we did was, as part of this partnership approach, and I think this is a brilliant way of doing business, we put managers, scientists, industry, ENGOs, industry scientists, we formed these assessment groups, these stock assessment groups, and we all had to sit around the table. The first few years it was really difficult. You know, some of the scientists didn't like to have to give annual results. They hadn't finished their study yet. They didn't want to say to industry like we're uncertain about things. So, and the industry was kind of a bit unclear about what the science could give them. The managers and the ENGOs were also a bit uncomfortable about being honest about what was going on. So it took a few years to everyone to meld, but it was a brilliant process, and we've still got it now. It's been going for 20 odd years, 25 years, and it's a good way of doing business, because what it does, it gives trust, respect, and brilliant communication. And hey, if you guys want to bring things together, that's a really good model that I think. I think they do that in the US. The EU's a little bit different, but I think it's a great model personally.
I would like to respond to two little things. One about illegal fishing, and the other about what should we do. Illegal fishing of the sort that you describe is not a fisheries problem. If somebody, say a rubber tapper, is killed in the forest, this is not a problem of forestry. If a fisher is somebody steals the money from a fisher when he goes shopping, this is not a problem of fisheries. And criminality is not sectoral. The sector that deals with criminality is the Justice Department and police. We have, until now, considered criminality and illegal fishing a fisheries problem. But it is a big mistake, because really you leave it in the hands of a sector that cannot do anything about it. You must realize that stealing, illegal fishing is stealing property. It's stealing property that belongs to people. And it must be a criminal offense. And you must work with the Justice Department or the police if you have trust in them. That's a different story, right? You can work with the police group that you trust, but you must get this out of the fisheries problem, because it's a criminal offense. And now illegal fishing by international companies, it is dealt with Interpol. It's not a fisheries problem. It's not to say we don't want to deal with it. It is we want to find a solution, and a solution cannot be within fisheries. About the general question, what should we do? The major problem that I have perceived here is the fact that you don't have a framework law, a basic law that regulates and that regulate fisheries, and that can be used by the ministers, by everybody as reference for judging things that happen and should happen. You cannot tell if the minister does a good job, because there is no criterion, there is no law that says this and this should be done in fisheries. So I think that what is needed is a broad alliance within the country that would unite the fishers, especially the artisanal fishers, civil society, the big NGOs, and lawyers group that would draft sample, an example of a legislation, that would draft legislation and find a senator or a politician, a progressive person that will introduce it into Congress. This is how the US got Stephen Magnuson. It's not Senator Stephen who wrote this law. It's not Senator Magnuson who wrote this law. This is a coalition of people who were exasperated, who were mad with the situation prevailing in fisheries. They drafted possible legislation, and it was sent to these two men, who then asked their staff to work with it. And then it's taken over by the politician, modified, and brought to Congress in a context of political alliance. But without, you always appeal to the minister to do something, but the minister should not do something. The civil society can actually initiate a movement to draft a basic law. And this basic law must include rights for the artisanal fishers. It must deal with where are we going? Where are we going to subsidize forever, or are we going to have profitable fisheries? Are we going to have sanitary condition in fisheries? Are we going to allow export to destroy the local marketing situation, and so on? So a general framework, and within are we going to rebuild? And within that general framework, then, a framework law, the minister then can be evaluated on whether the minister does what is in the law. And the law can be modified. In the US, the Stephen Magnuson Act is reauthorized. It's another word for modifying and readopting. And that's what you need. Because all the time you're talking about this decree, this decree. The decree have no basis. They are political expediency. You need a basic law. And a basic law can emerge only as a result of a broad alliance of people who demand it. And I'm sure there is one or two senators in your Congress who would be the champion of such legislation. Find that person and work with him or her. That's what I think.
Could I just make a comment about the illegal fishing as well? And I completely concur with what Daniel said. It's what we had to do in Australia was we had to educate the judiciary in some way. So probably in the 70s, someone was caught illegal fishing. They got a pat on the bottom, basically. Whereas now, they can end up in jail. So it's actually making sure the judiciary understands that these are real crimes. It's this, you know, these resources are owned by the people, and it's seriously illegal. We had massive illegal fishing in northern Australia. Some of you might have seen on TV. We actually know massive illegal fishing from Indonesia and Timor-Leste and places like that. The Australian government grabbed the boats, burnt the boats, fined the skippers, sent them home. You keep burning boats, you see these astonishing pictures from our surveillance guys. The border, the Northern Australian sea border, hundreds of boats just north of the border, waiting for the plane to turn around, and they all sneak back across the border again. It was a massive issue for us, but after 3 or 4 years of serious action, it stopped. So you're absolutely right, Daniel. It's a really, really important issue.
Rodrigo Moura, da UFRJ. Ontem e hoje nós ouvimos exemplos muito interessantes, né, muito válidos aí de bons manejos, de reconstrução de estoques. Mas o que realmente eu gostaria de ouvir, assim, acho que me acordaria, seriam exemplos que envolvessem países que têm diferenças conjunturais, dificuldades conjunturais mais parecidas com a nossa realidade, né? Quer dizer, é claro que a Austrália, os Estados Unidos, eles conseguem com mais facilidade consertar suas pescarias, porque os filhos dos australianos têm escola, os australianos têm hospitais, enfim, eu realmente gostaria de vocês que têm essa visão global de rebuilding aí, que pudessem falar mais sobre exemplos, que pudessem apontar alguns exemplos mais próximos da nossa realidade. Quer dizer, que país, ou algum país em dificuldades estruturais parecidas com as nossas conseguiu atingir esse tipo de objetivo, conseguiu estabelecer um bom sistema de gestão das pescarias, etc. Então, a minha reflexão vai mais ou menos nessa direção, e assim, com relação a como, o que fazer daqui para frente. Quer dizer, será que a gente realmente precisa de montar um esquema com muita participação científica, com muita ciência? Será que essa base de ciência é que vai resolver o nosso problema de rebuilding, de gestão pesqueira? Eu não estou dizendo que o conhecimento não é importante. Eu acho que realmente o conhecimento é chave. mas eu tenho minhas dúvidas se a ciência formal, acadêmica, ela realmente é peça-chave no nosso contexto, onde vimos que temos aí 60% de pescarias artesanais, temos uma série de demandas de regularização de território, por exemplo, né, que têm sido colocadas assim com muita clareza, mas a gente não vê essas demandas sendo incorporadas nas políticas ou nesses grandes planos. Acho que o simpósio tem mais ou menos esse objetivo, né, de construir um grande plano. Então, talvez a gente precise de pontos de partida ligeiramente diferentes do que esses muito agarrados, muito ancorados na ciência e na academia, mais os tomadores de decisão aí tomando suas decisões. É uma reflexão mais ou menos nessa direção. Tá?
There are indeed very few examples of successful, in developing countries, of successful fixing the problem of artisanal fishers. One reason is the neglect and the political decision that are always taken by the big fishery. But another problem is, you know, the English expression, to think out of the box. And the box is that to think that the problem, the solution to fisheries problem comes from the fisheries being better managed. The artisanal fisheries are in all developing countries big employers, and every artisanal fisher has children, and half of them are sons, and these sons will be artisanal fishers. And if the rate of growth is about 2-3%, you have a doubling of the number of artisanal fishers every generation, every 14-15 years. And every artisanal fisher is getting more effective with time. You have cell phones to tell each other where the fish are. You have much better gill nets that were not available to your fathers and grandfathers. You have become, through your skills and your knowledge as fisher, you have become very efficient hunters. You are much more efficient than your father and your grandfather. You are 4 times, 5 times, 10 times your grandfather. And so you think you are continuing a tradition of like your father, your grandfather, but you are not. You have become super efficient, and you are more than your grandfather was. And this is not the notion of sustainability. Your grandfather, if you could duplicate your grandfather and his fishing method, that would be sustainability. But you have become 10 times more efficient than your grandfather. One man fishes more, 10 times more than 3-4 generations ago. And your children, because they will use GPS that they can put in their watch, will be 3 times more efficient. Do you think that is sustainable? It's not sustainable. Do you think you can solve the problem of fisheries within fisheries? It's hopeless, you cannot. So the solution that has happened in fisheries, in countries that have lots of fishes and what were poor countries, is that these countries have actually drawn out people, young men, out of fishing. That is the solution. Young men must go out of fishing, not because we want to get rid of artisanal fishers, but because one artisanal fisher is more efficient than 10 artisanal fishers 2-3 generations ago. So the artisanal fishers that will remain will continue to be very efficient, happy, continue the tradition. But not all your children will, not all your sons and daughters will be able to do it. So the solution, the long-term solution, actually, is that people move into the general economy of the country. Now, are there examples of this? Every tiger country in Asia, I will take the example of Malaysia, has succeeded in getting fishers out of fishery, and the remaining fisher are doing better. This is almost the example of Norway, but they are 10 times less fishers, and they are much richer than before. This is not impossible in a developing country if that country develops. And Malaysia doesn't have good management plan. Malaysia doesn't have a solution to the problem between Chinese and Malay. It has all kind of problem, but the economy demands young men into other sectors, and the young men were the sons of fishers. That is the long-term goal that you must have, that your son become not necessarily a fisher, that they have an option to get out, because you are not the same fisher that your grandfather was. That's it.
O exemplo da Malásia é interessante, mas é um país que também promoveu reformas estruturais. Eles combateram a corrupção, botaram os políticos corruptos ou na cadeia ou no paredão. E aí temos aí um exemplo de reforma de pescas.
Well, yes, Malaysia does kill drug dealers. In Malaysia, they are shot. Yeah, and it does help. It does help. Australian, especially, like to go to Malaysia and Southeast Asia and sell drugs and stuff. And now, and also a French one. Now they hesitate. Every country in Southeast Asia where you get in is, if you deal drug, we will kill you. And they mean it and they do it. So yes, but the example of Malaysia is a good one because the country has not solved its fisheries problem, but it has offered opportunities in other industries that are built up for the sons of fishermen, and that is really a ray of hope. It is not saying there should be no artisanal fishermen. I think there should be, but there should be. It should not be a place where you have to be. It is a place where you choose to be because you continue a tradition. But it's not, you have changed the tradition because you are more efficient than your grandfathers.
Yeah. Okay. Is it my turn now?
If I can sit as well.
Posso dar um exemplo de uma...
Só um minutinho. A gente está entrando exatamente no ponto que nós queríamos do evento, a discussão, ampla discussão com a plateia, os palestrantes e todo mundo. Eu gostaria de chamar à mesa o Sr. Steve Murawski e David Smith para a gente começar a discussão.
Alô.
A palestra, onde já tivemos que ter uma alteração, faremos no primeiro horário da tarde, e a gente tem um período de discussão ali. Infelizmente não vai conseguir encaixar aqui. O Sr. Johan pediu a palavra para terminar a discussão aqui, e assim que terminar a fala do Sr. Johan, nós vamos abrir a discussão com os inscritos que estão aqui.
Okay, thank you. I was asked to stand. I don't know why. I'm very reluctant giving advice, but I can talk about what, but not how. It's clearly that Brazil needs a fisheries law with objectives and gives the room for regulating access to fishing and how to how to do the fishing. It's also, in my view, fairly obvious that Brazil needs a strengthened management system for its fisheries. I am very clearly of that view that you need science, not only local knowledge. So knowledge-based management, I believe very, very strongly in. Because what we often see is that people start walking, they know where they are, but they don't know where they are going. Or opposite, they know where they are going, but they don't know where they are. And neither that helps. So you need a knowledge basis in order to do management. And also the example about scientists sitting in a room and then telling managers, what we had that system 15, 20 years ago, and we got a lot of advice we had not asked for. It was kind of a biological jeopardy. So we had to train, the managers has to train to ask questions. And the management strategies is a structured way to do that. I will also say a few words about the IUU issue. I mean, Norway has been pushing and are financing that Interpol project on illegal. But from a fisheries management point of view, the unregulated and the unreported might be, I'm sure it is on global basis, much, much bigger in quantity than the illegal. So that is also a very important part of fisheries management. Fisheries management is the quantity that is the problem, not if it's illegal or not. But what is illegal should be taken, as Daniel said, that is a court case issue. That's a prison issue. That's a financial issue, and should be handled by those authorities, not by fisheries authorities. And also, I agree very much with Polly on his explanation or review of what is artisanal and who has to become fishermen. I mean, my father and his brothers, born in the 20s, that's 80, well, no, it's 90 years ago, they had to be fishermen. So that means 2.5, 3 generations ago, we don't get children early in Norway. So we have history, the history is the same. Malaysia is then laying some years before Brazil, and some countries will be behind Brazil. But the only solution to artisanal fishing is that the number of fishermen has to be reduced. And the artisanal sector has to accept that, because they are not any longer, as Polly said, they're not any longer subsistence or opportunity of last resort. They are small-scale fishermen becoming more and more efficient. So either they have to go or the fish will go. Thank you.
To what Johan had to say, and I agree with him about the central need for science, and maybe a slightly different reason. Certainly, you need to know where you are if you're going to get where you think you want to go. But also, basic science capability underscores the credibility of the management scheme. And if you have a management scheme that's based on political choices without the scientific evidence, then it becomes a non-credible scheme. If you say you were taking these actions because of this, collection of information you have, then people can actually understand and the basis for it, but also that science scheme must have a communication scheme with it, so people do understand that difficult choices need to be made, and here's the reason why, and then a lot of that flows. So I almost think that the science scheme needs to, generate information even before the basic law is changed, because it's the evidence that's going to create the upward momentum to do that.
So I quite agree with what Steve said, but I think it's also important you've got a framework in place in which the science evidence can be a good... How's that? Oh, wow, that's really impressive. Wow. Oh, that scared me. I think, yes, science is really, really important, but you also need a framework in which the science results and the science outputs can actually inform the management. So you need a clear route by which the science can be adopted by the industry and by the fisheries managers.
I have noticed that you are worried about what you've heard. And the best thing is to articulate this the best thing is to articulate this worry. So certain things have been said that can be discussed. For example, from our Norwegian colleague said, if there is no fish, either the fish have to go or the fishers have to go. This is an extreme formulation of the fact that if there is no fish, you cannot have a decent living from it, from the fish. And if there are too many hunters, whatever the hunters chase after will be devastated, will be diminished. And you don't realize it, but you have become very efficient hunters. And if we were talking about hunting rabbits or something, if you have more guns and there are more hunters, this will not make more rabbits. So you have the, do you want your son to be chasing after the last rabbit? Do you really want your son to be chasing after the last rabbit? Or you want him and maybe your daughter as well to go into any other profession? I mean, 2-3 generations ago, my father was not a fisher. My ancestors were not a fisher. They were picking cotton in slave plantation in the US. So do I want to do the same thing that my fathers did or my grandfather? No. And your children might want to not be fisher. And if they all are, then they will fight against each other because there is no more fish, because you have become very efficient. Now, if you cannot face this, you will not be taken seriously. If you want to talk with a minister that listens, and you want to have new laws in this country, you have to be talking seriously, and people have to take you seriously. But they will not take you seriously if you refuse to accept the fact that you are efficient fishers, that you are efficient at what you do. Because your pride, your pride as fisher comes from the fact that you are efficient. So if you are efficient, that means you are declining the fish. The fish, you will make it, you are removing them from the sea. That's what it means to be efficient. So you cannot both be proud and that you are efficient and say that you have no effect on the fish. If you do that, if you persist in saying, I'm efficient, but I have no effect on the fish, the minister will never take you seriously. The other partners that you need to have better law will never take you seriously. So it's time to become serious, because you are doing a good job. But doing a good job means you are making the fish decline. So be serious.